Hello and welcome to the Christ Lutheran Church Sermon Podcast. This is Matthew Best. I serve as pastor of Christ Lutheran Church in Allison Hill in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Thanks for being here. If today's message connects with you and what you're going through, brings you inspiration, or offers connection with God, I ask you to please stay on after the message for just a few moments to learn ways to connect with the congregation and the health ministries that we offer. And now, let's dive into God's Word. The Gospel comes from Mark, chapter 16. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on the way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. "Do not be alarmed," he said. "You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell the disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone, because they were afraid. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Mark's gospel is a bit of a disappointment at the end, isn't it? Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Kind of a letdown. Reminds me of when I was growing up. This was a film that my friends and I liked to watch, was Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And it's the story of King Arthur and the Round Table, and they're searching for the goblet that Jesus used at the Last Supper, and they travel all across the countryside and in crazy ways. They don't have horses. They have guys with coconuts making the horse sound, and it's a comedy and all this type of stuff. And they get to the end, they're going to raid this castle, and they're ready to raid this castle, and there's big dramatic music, and it's this big build up, and all of a sudden, the police from the modern era show up and they arrest the cast. And that's how the movie ends. Talk about a huge letdown. It's just like, what was this about? It's a letdown. I think in some ways, Mark's gospel is a little bit like that. It's a bit of a letdown. A bit of a disappointment in what we hear, what Mark is doing. There's no resurrection. Jesus is not in this resurrection story. He doesn't make an appearance. We're just told. And the disciples, the people who are closest to him, nowhere to be found. They've all scattered. The women who are there, they're coming to anoint Jesus' body, and they come across the stone is rolled away, and they have this angelic figure there. And at the end, trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. How in the world did the message spread? This is the traditional ending to the Gospel of Mark. If you look in your Bibles nowadays, there's more. And the idea is, because it's such an unsatisfying ending, that later folks added more to it. Because there's no nice bow to wrap it all up. There's not a happy ending. There's no Jesus in the original ending at Mark 16:8. The women flee and say nothing to anyone. That's how the gospel ends.
Whew! What a way to end a story. If Mark were trying to get this published nowadays, good luck. The publisher would be like, what? That's it? What? Is this some kind of a joke? But it's not. So on Friday, Jesus dies and he's buried in the tomb. They put the stone in front. And on Sunday morning, the women come. And they're bringing all of their spices and everything else, but I think they're bringing something else as well. And they represent all of us. They come with their expectations. They come with their expectations. They expect, think about what they expect. They expect that the stone is going to be in front. It says so right in the reading. We just heard it. They haven't even, I always wondered about this, reading this. It says, very early in the week, they were on their way, and they asked each other, who's going to roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb? They hadn't planned that out yet. They were expecting the stone to be there. They were expecting a tomb, and they were expecting a body. Why wouldn't you at a tomb, right? A sealed tomb. They were expecting cold and dark and damp and unliving. The stench of death beginning to really kind of build inside the tomb. That's what they were expecting. Why wouldn't they expect that? Instead, when they get there, the stone is rolled away and there's this angelic figure, and he talks to them and tells them what they least expect. Jesus is risen and has been unleashed onto the world. He's not here. He's going on ahead, leading the way. In that moment, they had their expectations, and their expectations were placed in the tomb. Their expectations died and were placed in the tomb because they were not needed anymore. The expectations were no longer needed. They were no longer accurate. Expectations are very human. We all have expectations. And when things don't match up with our expectations, we get disappointed. Maybe we get angry. Maybe we try to change things. I don't know. We do a lot of different things. Expectations give us comfort. They give us a sense of knowing and having a sense of some kind of sense of control of our lives. And that can be really addicting for human beings. We want Jesus to be where we expect him to be, doing what we expect him to be doing. We enter the tomb with the women with all of our expectations, our assumptions, our knowings, our sense of control. And what happens frightens us as well, just like the women. We find out we're not in control. The beautiful thing about Holy Week, it's my favorite week of the entire year, which makes sense given I'm a pastor, is you get the whole story from Palm Sunday, Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, if you do the Easter Vigil, and Easter morning. And it's all summed up in what we proclaim, life, death, and resurrection. It's all right there in 1 week, in a few days. The life part is a challenge. Life is not easy. We all know this. It's full of a lot of challenge. It's full of a lot of division. There's a lot of hatred. There's a lot of really nasty stuff. And there's some good stuff too. And we hold on to those things that are really good and happy and joyous, kind of like what we just experienced up here with the kids' sermon. A lot of happiness, and there's a lot of struggle. That's what life is. And God doesn't sugarcoat it. It's got the good and the struggle at the same time. And then there's death. Good Friday. It's a tough, tough day in the life of the church. The purpose of death, as I have often said, is to get on our face and to say, we're not in control. We don't like to hear that. I don't know of anybody who likes to hear that. But Jesus also says death doesn't get the final say. And that's what we celebrate today, is what resurrection is about, is that death doesn't get the final say. It's not the end of the book. It's not the end of what this gospel is. Yes, as far as writing goes, in the traditional sense, yeah, that's the end of it. But we have to go back to the very beginning of what Mark has. Because really, this is just the end of the beginning. The very beginning of Mark, if you remember when we started this way back when, it says, the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. This is just the beginning of the story. It's the beginning of the story. And what we have is this traditional ending of Mark that essentially is saying to us, okay, Mark saying, okay, I started the story for you, but there's more, and you're a part of it. You're a part of it. And the story continues on with each one of us. And it keeps going on. It's just the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ. Now it's your turn to see how the good news of Jesus, the Son of God, is being lived out in the world and in our lives, in our communities, in our congregation, and in all sorts of other places. It's our turn to participate in the good news, to be the women who are sent to go and tell. The very first preachers of the gospel of the resurrection of Jesus are women. And they're sent by God, by Jesus, to go and proclaim. That's beautiful. It's our turn to participate. Jesus is going on ahead of us. And Jesus has been set loose on the world. And the world wants to put all sorts of boundaries on Jesus. Lock him in a tomb and put the stone away. Maybe take him out, for special occasions or something like that. But the tomb can't hold him. So I wonder what the rest of the story for the world is now that God has been unleashed, that Jesus has been unleashed. We come to the tomb with the women and our expectations. I know for me, some of the things that I have encountered and create a bit of an expectation is that I expect that cruelty is going to be how a lot of the world operates, because that's how I've seen it. I expect that division is going to be going on a lot. I expect there to be violence. I expect the use of force and abuse and manipulation and oppression. I expect there to be lies and misdirection, greed and selfishness, and all sorts of creative ways to dehumanize people. Because that's what I've seen in so many different ways. And there are a lot of folks who want to make sure that that's the way it stays. And so there's a lot of incentive to put Jesus in a box, in a tomb, and keep him there, and just use his name when it's convenient. Maybe pull him out just for a short bit, just enough to kind of maybe cheer us up a little bit, but not actually transform the world, because that would be frightening. So like the women, we tremble and we're bewildered. The way we thought things were has died. It's in the tomb. What do we do now? We're afraid because we don't know what to expect anymore. We don't know what to do. Jesus has been unleashed and he's out of the box, he's out of the tomb, and we cannot control him. And that's a beautiful thing. There are people who are going to ask, well, how's Jesus going to mess the status quo up? And what we expect the world to be. And my answer is always, I hope a whole lot. Because the status quo ain't working. It never has worked. Never. So it's the beginning of the story. That's what Easter is about. It's the beginning of the story. It's the end of the beginning, but it's the beginning of the end, of the continuation of the story of what Mark started. A new life, a new way of being. That's what resurrection is about. Sure, those other things are still going to operate in the world because that's part of life. But Jesus goes on ahead of us, showing us a different way, a better way, and invites us to this new life, a new way. Leave all the rest of the expectations at the tomb where they all belong. We can roll the stone back over them. They're about as dead and empty as anything else. But Jesus has been raised. And we will be raised with him. Life has been raised. Joy has been raised. Forgiveness has been raised. Love has been raised. Mercy has been raised. Grace has been raised. And it's been all of those have been unleashed on the world. That's the new way. That's what resurrected life is about. It's transformative because there is no possibility that it can't be transformed, that the world can't be transformed from all of that. There's no containing it. The rest of the story is being written with each one of our lives. Not just individually, but all of us together. Because we can't do this on our own. Even the women came together as a group to the tomb. They couldn't do this alone. Jesus didn't do it alone. He had a group of folks that were with him. Nobody does it alone. We do it together. And our story is written together. And it's where Jesus shows up to keep writing the story. And Jesus invites us to go and tell. So where are you seeing Jesus unleashed in the world? Where do you see that new way, that new life unleashed in the world where people least expect it? That's what our eyes are open to see, in spite of all the other stuff that goes on. And it's really easy to see the other stuff. Where is Jesus alive? Where is the story continuing? That's what we're called to. Thanks be to God.
Thank you again for listening to the Sermon Podcast. I'm always happy to have a conversation or pray with you. Please reach out either by email to pastor@christharrisburg.org or call me at 717-236-8382. I'd also invite you to be part of worship on Sunday mornings at 10:30 a.m. We're a very diverse, open, affirming, and laid-back congregation. Christ Lutheran Church is located at 124 South 13th Street in Harrisburg. Parking is along the street. You can enter the building through the side entrance on South 13th Street or at the corner of 13th and Thompson Streets. And lastly, check us out on the web. Our website is christharrisburg.org. There you can learn more about and offer your support for the congregation as well as the health ministries and free clinics that we provide to people in need in our neighborhood. I invite you to follow us on Facebook and Instagram also at Christ Lutheran Harrisburg. Thank you. I look forward to connecting with you, and I pray that you have a blessed week.